Hi, and welcome back to my episodes in Introduction to Sociology. My name is Denise Linton, and I am faculty at Davidson Davie Community College in Sociology. So now we're coming into episode 4. The next 3 topics in the next 3 episodes are 3 of my favorite to talk about. This one is going to be socialization. So we're just coming out of, we talked about what is sociology, how did it start, how do sociologists use a systematic way through research methods, and then we talked about culture. Society is culture, culture is society. And we talked about norms, folkways, and mores, material culture, symbolic culture, and all that kind of fun stuff. So now we're coming into how do we learn all of that information? How do we learn norms, the folkways, the mores, what happens? And this is what we're going to be talking about in this episode. So let's jump right in. It's going to be a little bit more interactive than most of them. But so I really want to point out 2 words and the differences of words. We hear all the time, especially when we get to race and ethnicity, I was not taught to be racist or racism. I want you to understand the 2 differences. Taught means intentional. I am intentionally teaching you sociology. You're coming to my classes, you're on my video lectures, either whichever way it's happening. I am purposefully teaching you with intention all concepts of introduction to sociology. Now, learned is unintentional. It can be intentional, but it's mostly unintentional. It's everything around us. All behavior pretty much is learned behavior. We pick it up. And we don't even know half the things that are coming into our brain. We have what's called a subconscious, which I'll come back more to in how we create implicit bias in race and ethnicity. But we have a subconscious and so much is going in there. And we have to learn all these norms, the folkways and the mores, through our life. Can you imagine getting up every morning and going, okay, wait a minute, what's expected of me in society today? What do I wear clothes? Do I not wear clothes? What do I do? And so we've learned so much just by interactions. And we're going to focus a lot on symbolic interaction, sociological perspective today. That's where most of the theories are. And so we learn a lot of this. And we learn this through what's called socialization agents. These are family, school, peers, media. Media is huge. Government, religion. And these are the areas where we learn our values, our beliefs, the norms, the folkways, and the mores. When we're thinking about family, family is the longest lasting socialization influence. It's your first one. You're starting to pick up many of the values and beliefs, whether you understand them or not. And your family is the first experience. School is one of the next experiences. And school, you're picking up what's called hidden curriculum. We tend to talk about this later on when we get to education, but hidden curriculum. So one of my purposes and why I'm so strict on no late work or extensions is a hidden curriculum. I am helping you learn time management, which is used in work and other areas. But many other things in school, you've learned that were hidden. Yes, you did learn how to read and write, math and geometry, and you're being taught sociology right now. But you also learned K through 12 competition, how to get along with others, how to follow authority, how to raise your hand, how to ask permission, work in groups, although most of you hate that. And we'll talk about that in groups. See how it's all building up? This is why I tell you not to jump ahead. And so school plays a huge part, and it does have purposes. Peers. Now, peers are people your own age, friends, other people, and peers are the most influential socialization agent. This is a time, especially when you get to middle school and high school, when we're looking at groups and conformity in a few episodes ahead. We see that peers, now you're being introduced to other folkways, other mores, different cultures, different values and beliefs. And sometimes because of conformity and us wanting to fit in, we tend to go more with peers than what we've learned in our own family. However, you go back to the idea that family is the most influential. That's the one that stays with you the longest. I remember my parents were missionaries. I lived in Haiti and in Jamaica. Went to church every Sunday, youth group, till I was 18. And then I went off to college and was like, nope, don't want any of that. Wasn't interested in Protestantism. We were Presbyterian. I started to look at other religions, Wicca, Buddhism, New Age, reincarnation, experiencing a lot of other things, meeting people, and having that influence. Now, later on in my later life, I have gone back to my family's roots of Presbyterian. I'm an ordained minister in Presbyterian. And so in that religion, and it goes back to kind of went back to the most longest lasting, not necessarily most influential. Now, media, you're going to hear me talk a lot about media from here on out and what a huge role this plays in stereotypes, implicit bias. You think about how much screen time you have, commercials, advertising, labels on items at the grocery store, influencers, TikTok. I remember TikTok there for a while. You had all those TikTok challenges, and think about what an influence that was to students. I think the worst one was go smack a teacher. Oh, that infuriated me. But how many people were following that? We get a lot of information that we don't even know we're taking in from media. Government. We're learning about rules and the expectations of the dominant culture. And then religion, morals, values, beliefs. So as we're coming in, before I really jump into the really cool theories that I want to talk about, that textbooks talk a little bit, but I really like to go in more depth on it, is I want you to understand roles in society. We all have roles in society. These refer to expected behaviors, obligations, norms that are associated with a particular social position. For example, role. A role could be a student, an employee, a mother, a father, a daughter, a sibling, the oldest born, friend. They're things that we're playing, and they're part of our subcultures too. It can be, a gym rat while I'm at the gym and I'm lifting, playing out these roles. And there's a pattern of behavior that is socially recognized. It helps us identify individuals within society and that role they're playing. They serve as a guide for behavior in different social settings. What to look for, the roles of a student, whether you're a high school student or a college student. I am right now playing a role. I'm playing the role of professor. And with that, the expectations are I'm to teach you about sociology. I'm to teach you about the topics, time management, set guidelines, that hidden curriculum too, but also the main point of sociology. I'm a parent. And so my role as a parent, even though he's 25, but as he was coming up, my role as a parent was to provide physical and emotional care, financial care, get him through college. I'm still doing that. I really can't wait for him to graduate. He is a Marine, went to the Marines. That was awesome. Got him to that point. Now he wants to be a commissioned officer and he needs a college degree. So we're back to that. But so I'm financial support. love, nurturing. And so these roles are essential for understanding how individuals can navigate their social environments. How do we interact with each other in those different settings? One of the things that we have, um, and from the roles that we play, we also have what's called status. We each have different status, and different roles have a different status. And you're going to hear more a little bit later on. This is kind of giving you the basic, that kind of setting it down. And then we're going to pick it up when we get into the section called social stratification. But we have what's called ascribed roles. Ascribed roles are assigned at birth, and they're not chosen. This is sex at birth, birth order. You know, uh, I can't remember the royal family's 3 kids, but you Prince Charles and Prince Harry, when they were born in Monaco, they didn't have a choice. Now, uh, Prince Harry has done what's called a roll exit. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the kids were born. There's not really a choice. If you're born in a social class, you don't really have control over that. And so that's an ascribed role or status. A achieved status is getting your college degree, a military rank. You know, my son wants to be, he's a sergeant in the Marines, but he now wants to be a commissioned officer. I think it's a first lieutenant when he graduates with his degree. Professional promotion, sporting achievement. These are achieved status, and we look at that. You know, you could be a college athlete and football player, and now they may be playing in the NFL. It's a higher status we give to that. With these roles, we tend to have, we play so many in our lives at one time. I am a mother, an aunt, a soon-to-be mother-in-law, professor, friend, ordained minister, fur mom, fur grandma, I guess. I don't know if you call that a thing or not. And so a lot of times you can have what happens is called role strain. Now, role strain is something that refers to stress or difficulty that we experience when we're trying to meet the expectations with a specific role. So, role strain with a role. And some of these examples are, you know, as a professor, one of my most stressful times was at the beginning of January for the next second semester. And I had about 8 classes because I was doing not only my full-time but part-time at another community college. And so with that, I had about 325 students. Now, college professors only teach 6 classes a semester, and that's about an average of 150 usually at the community college level. And so having 325 students, all these assignments to read, all these emails, please, I need an extension. Oh, I didn't get my work done. I'm sorry. I know you say you don't take late work, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And then getting all these emails. And so I was going through trying to get all these. I probably had about 300 papers to read a week or assignments. And trying to get all through that and all the emails, I was really experiencing what was called role strain. There was a lot of stress with that. I could not wait to get over and get past that semester. You know, as caregivers, we may feel this. I know that when I was taking care of my mom who had cancer, my dad with Alzheimer's, he was mid stages. This took a lot. You know, it was both emotionally and physically draining. Trying to figure out everything, the demands, trying to manage my own needs, and it was difficult. Employee, you know, think about working a demanding job or at your job. Maybe the expectations aren't always clear and they're putting a lot more on you. or they're asking you to do all these different things, and you're like, I was never told this. And so this role strain can be very stressful. How do we cope with role strain? Well, one of the things is to manage role strain in the different categories by setting priorities. Sometimes we have to identify the most important tasks and focus on them. And so during that time that I was so stressful, I was like, all right, I need to get what do students need the most? What's the most difficult and the highest weighted assignments? So I would do the essay questions first. I began really sticking with my no late work policy. I had to set that in stone. And this is why I've gotten so strict on it. And now instead of sending out emails of like, I'm really sorry, I wish I could, or now I just say, I'm sorry, no, go read my syllabus. And so this was how I have managed the role strain with late work. Seeking support, engaging with friends, family, professional networks, communicating. If there's something going on and you're not understanding. So if you're having role strain and you're trying to get all these assignments done, and then you come to my class and you're looking at my assignment and you're like, I have no idea. Email me. You have to reach out. I get students all the time after the due date. Well, I didn't understand it. Well, why didn't you email me? Why didn't you communicate with me ahead of time so we could work with it? That would have alleviated a lot of stress. Time management is a big thing. You're going to hear me talk a lot about time management. Time management is important. If you have two or more roles that conflict with each other, we're going to come into role conflict. But learning that time management so that you can deal with role strain and then role conflict. How do you balance responsibilities more effectively for role strain? Now, role conflict is when two or more roles conflict with each other. This is forcing you to make a decision between the two. And not all the time, but there are situations. I just recently had a student who sent me an email. And again, I know you don't accept late work, but I had my senior prom going on. I had my final exams for high school. They were dual enrollment, high school and college. So their role was college student and high school student. And so the two roles conflicted. They had the prom, they had a sporting event for high school, they had assignments, and then they had a major assignment for my class. And they missed mine, and they said, they had made the decision to go to the prom, go to the sporting event, and do the high school assignments. They made that choice. And that's sometimes what you have to do. Now, prioritize how do you deal with role conflict. It also could be parents. Are you working and can you get off work? Do you take vacation days, or does your boss let you take off work so you can go to your child's soccer game? Could be the first soccer game of the year. So think about the different roles. Are you going to be a friend and go out and hang out with your friends Friday night and go to the sporting event, or are you going to do your college work if you can't fit it in all there? So which one are you going to prioritize? And that's how you deal with role conflict. I am all for, and this is one of the reasons why in my full-time position at Davidson Davie, I do there's many easier assignments. And the reason I have so many assignments is because if a student is in this position of role conflict and they have to choose between work or doing my assignment, it's not going to kill your grade if you miss a couple of assignments and get a 0. You may not have a 100, but you have to make choices and prioritize what is the most important and be okay with it and move on. The final thing that we can deal with is what's called role exit. Now, role exit is something that we can experience, and some people do, and it's when a person leaves a role that might be a significant part of their life. So I mentioned Prince Harry before. He's kind of left the role. He did a role exit of being Prince of England. And he kind of backed off. He looked at what was happening. Was that something he still wanted to do? And there were a lot of other things with it. But he did a role exit. I'm not going to play the role of monarchy anymore. Sometimes I've had students who have emailed me and tell me, I'm doing horribly in the class. I've missed so many assignments. I'm dealing with parenting 3 kids. I'm working 2 jobs. I am looking at eviction. And I understand the situation. And sometimes it may sound harsh, but sometimes I say, well, you may need to look at a role exit. Now, you can't do role exit with kids. That would not turn out well. You can't say, okay, I'm going to choose not to be a parent. You're going to probably have to work. And so sometimes right now, being a college student may not fit into all the other stressors, and you're going to have to make a decision on one. And kind of saying, okay, because even if I gave extensions, and I have found this in situations like that, they don't get them done anyways. And so sometimes we have to have that hard conversation of maybe it's time to do a role exit for right now in your life. So those are the roles. Let's look at some of the theories. These are some pretty cool theories. The first theory is by a sociologist by the name of Charles Cooley. He follows symbolic interaction, and all of these are going to be symbolic interaction theories under symbolic interactionism. And Charles Cooley, looking at interactions with people, he came up with a theory called the looking glass self, our identity. How do we create our identity through socialization and learning and interactions with people in society? And this is a little confusing, but let me see if I can break it down. The looking glass self says we begin to create our identity based on what we think other people think about us, what we perceive. Now, it's not always right, but based on our interactions, what we've learned through socialization, we begin to think about ourselves based on what we think other people think about us. And that's why he calls it the looking glass. So the looking glass was the first name of handheld mirrors when you're looking into it. What image are you getting? So this is the first part of our kind of interactive part of the video. I'm hoping that you will play along. But what I want you to do is, if you would, go ahead and pause the video and write down 5 statements about yourself. I'll give you my 5, and then I'll kind of explain them a little bit coming from Charles Cooley's theory. But my 5 are, I am, so 5 statements about myself. I'm a good sociology professor. I am funny. I am intimidating. I am fat. And I am standoffish. Now, these can be positive or negatives. There's a reason why I did 2 of these, because it's a whole lot easier to show you on a broad spectrum of how to understand that. So pause it real quick and write those down and then come back. Okay, hopefully you wrote down your 5 I statements. And so let me break this down a little bit with the 5 I statements. Charles Cooley says, where did I come up with this identity that I am a good sociology instructor? Well, when I'm in class, a lot of students are paying attention to me. They're watching me. I kind of, their gestures, the way they're interacting with me, it makes me think that, hey, I think they're understanding this. So I think I'm a good sociology professor. Now, there's been days in classes, I just finished up one class this past semester, they never spoke. There was no reaction. For 16 weeks, I couldn't get them involved. And I was really starting to apply this Charles Cooley's looking glass self, going, all right, they're not talking, they're not raising their hand. I have tried everything. Maybe I'm not a good sociology professor. It doesn't mean that it's true, and that's the thing that we need to think about. We're not looking at people's opinions. We're not worried about people's opinions. We are looking at how I think other people think about me. And we kind of, it could be gestures. Not always like somebody saying, you're a really bad sociology professor. It's what we're imagining. I'm funny. A lot of times in many different roles, whether I'm teaching class or I'm with friends, I talk and people laugh. Many people laugh, and so I think, okay, I'm kind of witty, I'm kind of funny, and I can imagine that. Now, my students and my friends could be laughing at me and not with me, but I am perceiving that they think I am funny, and that's the identity that I get. The one on I am fat. So the reason I use this one is because this is a great example of how media plays a role in our socialization and how we're coming up with these ideas. And so growing up and watching movies, and this is how we learn, not taught, that watching movies and interactions, people my size, the interactions, the comments, the way they were treated. And I see that kind of resemblance and I go, oh, then in hearing the word, you're fat in the television shows or the commercials and things like that. Oh, well, then that must be how other people see me. I kind of look like that. A great example would be one of my favorite movies is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's an older movie. And there's a marketing guy and he's made a bet with these coworkers that he can make any girl fall in love with him in 10 days. And so they're at the bar and they've made the bet and he's going to let his coworkers pick out the woman so that he can win the bet. And I remember this one scene and it goes to this woman and she's about my size and blonde hair like me and she was wearing this dress and they kind of pointed to her and he goes, oh, come on, ladies, be nice. And so I take that image. It's coming in. Oh, I look like her. I'm her size. I must be fat or it must be bad. This theory is really going to come out and come back up, especially when we get into race and ethnicity. And so this is one of the reasons why I spend so much time on these three coming up theories, this one and a couple others. I'm intimidating, I'm standoffish, same thing. I really have a big heart, but people kind of tend to get quiet around me, and I go, they must be thinking I'm intimidating or, I'm standoffish of people. And I am. I'm probably the most extrovert introvert that you will ever meet. I'm very extrovert in classes, when I'm traveling, and places where there's strangers, but put me in a room of people I know, I'm very, very quiet. And so those are the images. This is Charles Cooley's. And like I said, we got to understand this theory as we move on. It's a big foundation. And it's a pretty interesting theory. Again, not based on opinions. It's not that we're worried about opinions. It's how we perceive ourselves based on what other people, we think other people think. And it may not even be right. Another theorist, symbolic interaction theorist, and my favorite, by the way, is Erving Goffman. And he comes up with a great theory, and it's called role performance. Erving Goffman kind of took a little bit of what Charles Cooley talked about, and then another theorist that we're going to talk about, W.I. Thomas, in a minute, and he came up with, okay, so we are perceiving people, but you know what? We're kind of con artists. We're all actors on a stage. The stage is settings, and we're actors in the different roles that we play. And so he called this theory dramaturgy and drama. We're acting out the roles. And he says we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that people know the role that we're playing at that time, because we play many different roles. We also want people to know, and we want to give this impression that others see us, and we want them to perceive us as that we're doing a good job for the role. This is called impression management. It's all kind of in his theory of role performance and dramaturgy. And so we want to give the impression, I am trying to give you the impression that as I'm playing the role of professor, that I want you to perceive me as a good sociology professor. And so I set up my classes so they're easy to kind of navigate. I put a lot of effort into my video lectures, my information, my assignments. When I'm playing that role, I want you to, number one, know that I'm in that role. And number two, I want to give you the impression that I'm doing a really good job. I have students, if you're coming in and you're playing the role of student, right now you're playing the role of student, and I can't see you, but if you're in my class and you come in and you want to give me the impression, first of all, that you're playing student, that you're supposed to be in the classroom, then you're trying to give me an impression that you want me to see that you're a good student. You're paying attention to me. You're taking notes. You're giving me eye contact. Maybe you're laughing. Maybe you're raising your hand. I don't know. We focus on trying to give that impression of the role we're playing, that we're doing a good job. One of the things, if you're looking at Charles Cooley and Irving Goffman's role performance, I get emails from students who miss assignments, especially during the first part of the course. And I get the emails of like, oh, Miss Linton, I'm so sorry. I missed this assignment. I'm not asking for an extension. I just want to apologize. This really isn't like me. And what they are is, from Charles Cooley's point, they are thinking that I perceive them as a bad student for missing an assignment. Really, I'm going with, it could be role strain, it could be role conflict. You just made a decision. I don't think any less of you, but they want to also give me the impression that I'm really a good student. And this happens quite a bit. Now, we also use setting, props, and manner, is what Irving Goffman says, to play the actor of a stage. Just like in a play, you have the setting, you have props, you have the scene. And so this is the next part of the interactive part. And so I hope you enjoy this, but give me a minute and we're going to put this in a little bit of action so you kind of understand. All right, so pretend I'm not in front of a video camera and I'm just walking down the street and you see me, and maybe you see me on campus or, at the festival, something, and you see me, and do you know what role I'm playing? Can you take a guess? Probably not. Okay, now you see me on campus coming into a classroom. I got my book bag here. I got my iPad, and I walk in and I come in and you see me sit down at a desk. What role am I playing? Could be a high school student, mostly college, maybe. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay? So it's a lot easier to identify the role that I'm playing. Let me give you another one. Hi, you're driving down the road. You see me. I've got a cones. I've got the orange vest. I'm kind of doing this. Might have a stop sign in my hand, or slow, yield. What role am I playing? construction worker, um, maybe construction, road work, something like that, right? All right, let me give you one more. Hi, now I'm standing in the classroom. I've got my faculty polo shirt on, which anybody can wear, but I also have my name tag. This kind of stands us out so that I can give you the impression of the role I'm playing. You automatically notice it. So let's break these down now. All right, so here's why I do the little charades. So when I first came up, I was in a t-shirt, shorts, just standing there. It's very hard to see what role I'm playing, and without the props, setting, and manner. So then what I did was then I had a book bag and the iPad. This is material culture. This is props. The setting, although I'm in my office, but if I was in the classroom, and if I was in the classroom at a high school with a book bag and my iPad, and because of my age, you're able to go, okay, wait a minute, not a high school student because of age, maybe a substitute teacher, maybe a new teacher, okay. And this is that where the acting part comes in. And then the manner. What the manner is symbolic culture. What gestures am I using? If I was in the classroom and I came down and on a college campus, even with my age, you could say, oh, they're playing the role of a college student. Then I went to the road worker, the props, the uniforms. When you're an employee at a company, a lot of companies have uniforms. It is to help people identify the role you're playing. One of the funny things is I used to go to Walmart a lot, and all the time I couldn't figure it out at first, and then I had to use my sociological thinking. But people would come up and go, hey, where is such and such? And I'd be like, I don't work for Walmart. Why are you asking me? And then I was using my beginner mind and my sociological imagination, and I realized that this was happening more when I had a light blue t-shirt on. And I love light blue and blue, so most of my t-shirts are that color. And so I was like, I'm gonna do a little experiment here. And so I stopped. Every time I'd go to Walmart now, I would make sure that I was not wearing a blue shirt, and I got less questions. I just got to the point where if I was wearing a blue shirt and people asked me, I go, yeah, it's on aisle 43. I don't know. But we're so used to that. We're looking for those props, that material culture to identify, so we can identify right off, are you an employee? Are you, what are you? And we use this for many jobs have different colors for managers and different for employees. And then in my last one with my faculty shirt, we changed our dress code. A lot of times I will dress up. I kind of come in. I am more dressed than what I am in my backstage. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm more dressed up when I'm in the role of professor at school. But we've changed our dress code where we're not having to do that anymore on my campus, and we can wear jeans and our polo shirt. But we don't want people to think that we're just a college student, because we want people to be able to identify that. And so we have a name tag. And I have a name tag for each of the colleges that I do work at part-time. So we can be identified on that role. And that's what Irving Goffman is talking about, that we're kind of looking at. And this whole actors on a stage, the role performance, we're performing a role, and we are doing it to the expectation so people know which role we are playing. And we do need the setting. If I'm out running around, and nobody could care less if I have my polo shirt on when I'm running around to stores, or what if I'm out in the middle of the street trying to teach sociology? People are going to go, oh, that person is a little whacked. But if I'm in a setting that is designated for teaching, then it's a whole different story. And so, and we try to put the impression as I'm a good employee. I'm coming dressed. My manner is my gestures, my tone of voice. How am I interacting with you? W.I. Thomas, in his Thomas theorem, said that because of these roles, and they kind of all work together and build off of each other. Charles Cooley, W.I. Thomas, Irving Goffman. And W.I. Thomas says that when we have learned and we start seeing things, it becomes reality based on things that we've learned. For example, if you saw a woman with a black eye sitting on the front porch crying and a guy sitting next to her, what comes to your mind first? And a lot of times when I say that, many students will say, oh, he hit her. Domestic violence. It could be that she really did fall and hit her face on the stairs going up. But because we saw that, we make it real, and then we call the police and say, oh, this is what happened. And it becomes real, these situations. And we've learned this through gestures and different roles and actions. The final theory, that's a really good one, is called George Herbert Mead's theory. And his theory is called Development of Self and Society. And this is how we learn the roles. And it's pretty fascinating if you think about and go back to when you're much younger. How were we socialized? How did we learn? How did you know that when I put on that orange vest that maybe I was construction or road worker? Or I had the book bag and the iPad. You could go, oh, that is, a student, college student, high school student, based on age. And so how we learn this, play these roles, George Herbert Mead says we go through a couple of different stages. The first stage is preparatory stage. This is about the age of 0 to 3. Babies. I love babies, but you're looking at them and you're going, hi, hi, and they go back and go, hi. They have no idea the concept of hi. They don't know that this is an acceptable norm to greet people, what it means. All they know is you did it to them, they do it back, and then mom and dad or somebody goes, yay, and they're like, oh, that was good, let me do it again. I like getting that praise. And this is why socialization works. We like having positive sanctions. Go back to culture. And so then about 3 to 5, George Herbert Mead says we enter in what's called the play stage. Now, the play stage is where we are watching. Remember, we're learning. We're not being taught. Most of you have not been sat down between the ages of 3 and 5 and said that moms cook, clean, dads mow the lawn, or whatever roles or expectations. Teachers teach you sociology. Nobody's sitting down and doing that. Children between the ages of 3 and 5 are learning to identify roles, but they're not understanding exactly what the roles mean. So this is a time where they're playing with the kitchen set. Or if you're looking and you're watching mom cook, or maybe dad cooks. Oh, well, dad's a cook, I'm going to copy him. And it's a little bit of the imitating stage, but you're starting to able to see these roles. I have a great example. I have some very close friends of mine. They're much younger, husband and wife, and they have 3 children now. And we've been very, very close for about 15 years now. And I remember when their oldest was born and then their second. And so there was 2 boys. Now they're the ages of 6 and 8. But I got to really see this play out when they were about 3 and 5. And so I've been around since they were born. The day they were born, I go over. And so these are the things that I do with them. Whenever they need a babysitter, I call it hanging out with the boys. I go over and stay with them in the evening. I come for all their birthdays. I bring them surprise gifts. I let them get away with a little more than the babysitter. I get on the floor and play. I hug them. I tell them I love them. I am there for holidays. I go to their sporting events. And nobody has ever identified me from day one as anything other than Miss Denise. Well, About 3 to 5, they were calling me. I'd come over and they'd go, "Grandma," and some were freaking out. I know the real grandparents were probably having a little bit of an issue with that. Of, wait a minute, that's not your grandmother. Who's telling you to say that? And nobody told them to say that. They don't. They didn't understand the concept of grandma at the time. They understood that grandmas are old. I'm like 2 years younger than his mom. Grandmas, when they come over, mom and dad would identify them as grandma and grandpa, but when they come over, they were doing the same types of things in their role as grandma as I was doing. And so they would, they didn't know that grandma is mom or dad's mother. And so with that, all they were identifying was the actions. Remember the props, the settings, the manner coming to their house. And so they would call me grandma. And so that's the play stage. Yeah, you think about Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol is great. This is where media plays a role. And you see Chase. He has a blue hat, and they have the blue hat and the star on the badge. And okay, so after the play stage, or I'm sorry, after the play stage, about 5 to 7 children come into the game stage. And like I was saying with the play stage, Paw Patrol, you see Chase with the blue hat. He's in blue. He's got a star, and children are able to go, "Oh, that's a police officer." Well, they have no idea what a police officer does or the expectations or anything like that. Same with Marshall. They just automatically see somebody with, if you saw somebody with a hat like that and red, "Oh, firefighter, firefighter." It doesn't mean that they know anything. But then they go into the game stage. And the game stage is when we start understanding the roles. And so for my 2 little guys that would call me grandma, they don't do it anymore because now they've figured out that I am not grandma. They're now into understanding exactly what the roles are and what they mean. They are, grandma is dad's or mom's mom. And I saw this one night. I was putting them to bed, and the youngest one is so cute. I love this kid. But he was trying to procrastinate too. But he looked at me and goes, "Miss Denise, do you have family? Where's your mommy and daddy?" And so I was like, "Well, my mommy and daddy have passed on. They're in heaven." And he's like, "Oh." And he's kind of looking at me. And I could tell he was in the stage where he was learning now how people's different roles played out and how they kind of interacted. And he said, "Well, your husband's in heaven too." And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "You don't have any family." And he had this very sad look on it. And I said, "Well, I do, my son, but you never see him because, he's been off with the Marines and now college." And he's like, "Oh." And I said, "But I do have family." Now, I do teach sociology of the family, and we talk about marriage and family in the definition, but I didn't go all into that with him. But I said, "I do have family. You're my family." And he's like, "How am I your family?" And he said, "Well, I said, "You support me, you love me, you got my back, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then you're my family. Family is a lot more than aunt, uncle, whatever." And so I could tell that he was in the game stage. He's starting to put this together. George Herbert Mead calls this generalized other. And this is where it's important to understand, and we go back to Irving Goffman's role performance. Now we can understand in the generalized other what to expect out of roles. We know what the roles are. We know the behaviors. We know that when we go into Walmart and somebody's behind the cash register, that we've got somebody who is, running the cash register. We have a manager. We have somebody over at customer service. You go into a restaurant, you have somebody who seats you. Then you're able to identify those gestures, the material culture, the props, and you can begin to predict what's going to happen. When you come into school, you can predict that the teacher, instructor, professor is usually going to be up at the front of the room. They're going to use a whiteboard or whatever. Now, because we don't have to figure all this out, we can predict it. And George Herbert Mead uses a baseball game as an analogy. If you've ever played sports or baseball or softball or even watched it, you have all the different roles on the field, and they know if the batter hits the ball and there's nobody on first running to second, they're going to throw it to first and get the batter out, the runner out. And you can begin to predict this very much like all the different social settings. And it's very important for that with generalized others. You can predict what's going to happen when you come into the classroom, when you come into work with employees. And so this is George Herbert Mead's theory is all about how we're learning the roles and then understanding them as they're being acted out. So the last couple of things that you need to know is socialization does not end at 18 years old. You don't go, okay, I know everything. I've met the generalized others. I know how to act out the roles. I'm done. Socialization continues throughout your lifetime. You have to be resocialized for every setting. When you go from middle school to high school, it's very different. It's still school, and there's a lot of things that are similar, but there's different rules. One of my funnest things are, when I have high school students who are taking college classes for the first time, they're in my class, and they're raising their hand going, can I go to the bathroom? And I'm like, you're in college? Let me just re-socialize you here right now with the norms. You do not have to ask. You can get up and leave anytime you want to. You can go get a drink. You can go to the bathroom. You can go use the phone. You can leave if you want to. You don't need a hall pass. And then when you go to different jobs, you get married, you're living with other people. There's all these other different parts and norms that you have to learn. And so this is called resocialization. We also have total institutions. Now, total institutions, the main purpose of total institution is to resocialize. And these can be voluntary or involuntary. Examples of total institutions are prisons, monasteries, military, cults. And so if you think about prisons are involuntary. And you think about why do we send people to prison? It's because they haven't been able to follow the norms and the rules of society. And so they're going to have to kind of be resocialized and taught how to do that. And so they're sent to prison. And with that main purpose. And it's involuntary. Military is a voluntary total institution. I remember when my son went to Marine boot camp, and he showed up, and the only thing he came with was his driver's license and the clothes he had on. And so when he got there, they took his civilian clothes, and they dressed all the same in green. They were called cadet, and the purpose was to resocialize them. They had to take away all the norms that they've learned and the morals about thou shalt not kill, and things like that. And Marines are the first one in, and they're the craziest, just so you know. And they are literally, and I know this sounds harsh, but they are literally being resocialized to kill and to die. And this is one of the issues that we have with the problems of military coming back to civilian life. We're not doing a very good job. We put them through this 16-week boot camp to resocialize them, but then we're not doing a very good job to resocialize them to come back to civilian world, where it's very, very different. And this is why we have a lot of PTSD and suicide, with suicide rates so high. We're not resocial. We don't do a good job with that. We do a good job going in to meet that purpose, but not coming out. All right. So that is socialization. It's one of the longer ones. I get it. But there's so many really good theories, and you really need these theories to understand them as we move forward into deviance, groups, social class, race and ethnicity, and constructing gender. So if you not understanding, please make sure that you are reaching out. All right. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.